Can you get too comfortable here?
Oh, you're fine.
Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Allure of the Poor, sponsored by Dracaena Wines. Today, I am sitting down with, I don't know, you are definitely the most famous person that I have had on this podcast. I have never had the pleasure of somebody who has been on TV other than wine TV or anything like that. But we are sitting down with Gary Conway and Mark Ellerman of Carmody McKnight Winery in Paso Robles. So welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting us.
It's great to be here.
Thank you. Now, Mark, can you give us a little background on how you are related to the winery?
Well, one morning, right when it was known that the pandemic was beginning in March, I got a phone call from Gary Conway, and I have no idea how he found me, but he was mentioning that his winery is really changing its focus into more of a direct-to-consumer model. And he needed some marketing expertise. And he asked me to take a look at his story and the history of the winery and to come up with ideas on where to take this luxury winery. And as soon as I started to dive into the Conway history and the story of the winery, I just became very fascinated by it. And so then it's been, well, since March now, and I've just been having a great time working very closely with Gary and his wife Marion McKnight Conway on the wines and developing certain labels and also revamping our direct-to-consumer online presence in such a way for people to come to carmonymcknight.com and learn so much about the history of the family heritage, which is a truly pioneering heritage of West Paso Robles, and also order some wines in the future. So prior to that, I started my wine expertise in 1985 in Boulder, Colorado, selling mostly French wines. And took that into a lot of different areas of restaurants. And then I became a tourism marketer, and my firm, Mental Marketing, really handled a lion's share of the tourism marketing business of San Luis Obispo County. And how do you market tourism in San Luis Obispo County? Well, you market the wines.
Wine, absolutely, marketing the wine.
And I will say too that when you think of, we got the vineyard maybe before we planted the grape about 50 years ago. And we planted about 38. But the background of that is I sold half of this ranch to Justin Baldwin.
Oh, okay.
And at that, we were essentially the very first to plant on the west side, and to some extent on the east side. There's a couple others, like Dr. Hoffman, who did some experimental with Andrei Shelishev. So, but in that period, 35, 40 years, that's a long time. And I started with Paso Robles at a point when Paso Robles was a joke. And I met that joke one day when we made wine the very first time, and I thought I'd be smart and bring a bottle of wine to LA to sell it in Santa Monica. And again, I was very naive. And when I walked in there to the shop, he said, I said, this is, believe me, it was a bit of a Cabernet. Well, it was a blend at that point. And he said to me, I like your label, and it's smelling the wine. He said, where does it come from? I said, Paso Robles. And he said, what? Paso Robles? And I realized we have a long way to go, And but now, at this point, I know through science and studies, so many of which have been on our vineyard for 10, 20 years, some of the most important, if not the most important in all agriculture, that Paso Robles, especially Paso Robles west side near the ocean, is by far the most important and best place for viticulture in the world. Nothing comes close. Nothing comes close. We're the only just essential for great viticulture is a Mediterranean climate. And most people in your audience, most people don't realize that the Mediterranean climate has left California, has left France, has left Italy. And the only Mediterranean climate that we have now, and this was defined by one of the Cal Poly professors, climatologists, is in the west side of Paso Robles. And I think that's a stunning, stunning realization. And I don't know what we're all going to have to do about it, whether people are going to have to relocate. And I think that's coming up. Climate warming, I just read an article about Napa and Sonoma that a lot of that is probably going to have to be relocation and different varietals. But anyway, I have a long, incredible background, especially in the science of all this, because we've had over 300 viticultural earth scientists led by Dr. Tom Rice, who had a, you know, Cal Poly, and who, and from all over the world, by the way, and who studied every aspect. And the reason they chose that vineyard, because at that point we had never, and to this time, never fertilized, never fertilizer, never sprayed, never did anything but grow wine like done for centuries. You put a vine in the ground, it comes up, you get the grapes best you can, and you make wine, and you don't add anything to it. You don't even add oak. That would be unthinkable.
Well, before we get into a little bit more of your wine making style and all of that, first I have to say, happy belated birthday. It was just earlier this week, right? Or late last week? Yeah. See, I do a good job of snooping, don't I? When I go to interview somebody.
Too good, I'm worried.
So first, happy belated birthday. And then we have to kind of go for you, we have to kind of go really back into the history, because it really, your history is really intriguing pre-wine. I mean,
yes.
You were the youngest artist to win a major prize at the LA County Art Exhibition.
Right.
Like, you were only 15 years old. First of all, I give you all credit, because I can't even draw a stick figure. Like, one arm is this way and one arm is this way, you know, whatever it is to figure. So art is always an amazing thing to me. So winning that award, and then what, like, did you initially say, I'm going to be an artist, and in that competition?
I decided to be an artist. I decided to be an artist when I was about 4 or 5 years old.
Did you?
I love painting, and my parents encouraged me, and I got a lot of attention. And by the time I was 14, I had won 4 scholarships in art with Chenard Art Center, and the 4 most important on the West Coast. And it was so unusual to have done that, that my school, high school, allowed me to go to my scholarships in the afternoon. I would go to LA in the morning.
Wow.
So when I was 14, 15, I spent all this time at Chenard, as I said, in Art Center, and a couple of the other great schools. And that's how I started my life in a way. And I was always going to be an artist.
What is your favorite? I'm blanking on the word. Like, you know, people use acrylics, people use oil. You know, like
I use everything. Even if you see, I don't know if you can see a painting behind.
Yes, I can.
But I love all kinds of stuff. So in my paintings, I use a lot of pencil inks you could see come through, and I use oil colors, and then there's a new kind of paint, which is a water-based oil color. I use that. So because they all have wonderful, it's like winemaking. You want to use different kinds of grapes that can make up a unique combination. And to me, that's why art and wine in many ways are very similar, very elusive. And by the way, that's in terms of a luxury wine, as we are using that term. why wines, for instance, in Napa, I think the top 25 wines, the cheapest sells for $500 a bottle. Of the top most expensive wines in the world, the cheapest sells for $1,500 a bottle. But no one can explain that. No one can explain. There's no scientific way of explaining. It's very much in the art world. After all, Van Gogh couldn't sell a painting all of his life. His mother hated painting so much, as most people did, she burned them. Yet today, he's the most expensive artist who ever lived. So how do you explain that? Well, explain that because he had a story that people were attracted to. And once they understood what he was up to, understood him to a great extent, they put a price on that.
Right.
And so to me, a wine today without a story ain't going nowhere.
Absolutely. And same thing with Monet. He was like desolate, right? He had nothing.
Right. They all were.
His
Most impressionists were. Gauguin was another favorite of mine. I mean, he was destitute. He got to sell a few paintings.
Yeah.
And so when you finally say, well, if Van Gogh was worth nothing, why is he worth in a painting now 500 million? The painting didn't change. The painting didn't get better. It's his story people like, and I believe the same thing with wine.
Right.
Why does Romani Conti get $11,000 a bottle? A bit of the history. Why does Scarecrow up in Napa get $1,500? Can anybody explain that?
Because people are willing to pay it.
Well, they're willing to pay it only because they've heard about it and they're paying for the story.
Right. They want to be part. They want to be part of that story. Absolutely.
But wine. Remember, my point was that wine and art have this quality in common. Artichokes don't, or making shoes doesn't. No one cares. It's a great art. And there are, by the way, there are areas that make the greatest artichoke in the world.
Ever, absolutely, but nobody will. That's awesome. That's fantastic. So you are also you are very, very creative, because you're an accomplished violinist who played in the Hollywood Bowl.
Played in the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh my gosh.
When I was a junior high school, and I played in the high school orchestra, so I was able to qualify the high school orchestra in the Hollywood Bowl for a great concert. That was my highlight.
That must be amazing. I've attended concerts there. I went to my undergrad was outside of LA, so I attended concerts there. But oh my God, that must have been incredible.
You have to make decisions even at a young age, because I got really good with the violin, but I was facing 5 hours a day to practice. So at age 15, if I had to be serious about it, I would have to come home from school at the next 4 or 5 hours, be playing my violin. And so that was occurring while I had these great scholarships, and I was attending my art schools. It always go for 3 hours in the afternoon. It took me a bit of time to get there. And so that was a critical moment in my life. Are you going to be a violinist? Or are you going to be an artist?
Right.
And I thought to myself, actually, I'm a better artist than a violinist. And so I went that way and knew that I would have to spend all my time in art. And I became an art major at UCLA, which has nothing to do with actually painting and drawing. It's a lot of it ended up being history. And I would have continued, except one day, when I had to make the decision, I had to make the ultimate decision. Okay, I'm going to be the artist, so now I'll go to Paris and study and starve for the rest of my life. So that was what I had in front of me. And then one day somebody said, "Hey, would you like to have a contract with Warner Brothers?" There was the #1 TV producer right about that time in 1959, 1960. They were doing all the shows, and I said, and it was kind of a lot of money, especially. So I thought to myself, wait a minute, am I going to go and starve in France? Or am I going to hang out at Warner Brothers with all the stars and make $400 or $500 a week? I thought, I think I'm going to stick it out here and do that. And But I kept painting, kept drawing, even had an exhibit right during that time and so on. Because you never stop thinking as an artist. That's my basic.
So I wanted to
drive.
ask that, like, how did you go from art history and architecture, right? That you also were studying architecture in UCLA. How do you go from there to being asked, do you want to be on a show in Warner Brothers?
Well,
Like,
what happens in my case, in other cases, is it happened 2 or 3 times. Somebody saw me and said, "Hey, I think
there's a good-looking
you
guy.
could make it as an actor." And I was in the Army doing a radio show, which is a little and volunteer. I volunteered for the Army. Can you imagine that? How great that is. People I know who got high up never volunteered. And so when I came out, the agent saw me somewhere, and in fact, I've had that 2 or 3 times. And he said, you look just like Burt Lancaster. And Burt Lancaster was kind of the reigning guy at that time. And studios, when they hire people for contract, hire because you're the actor. You have to kind of look like a previous actor, because then they figure you're an actor, right? And you can do well. Could do well. And also the other actor I was always, I don't know whether you know him, he's a wonderful guy too, Dale Robertson. So it was Dale Robertson and Burt Lancaster. And so that's how I started, because when I was introduced, he looks just like Dale Robertson, who's doing a series at that time, or just like Burt Lancaster.
That's
So
funny.
it's kind of easy in a way if you have a certain look.
Okay, I guess I don't have that look. I was in LA quite a bit. I guess I don't have that look. But
I can't explain it.
Me neither.
I even I'm a huge horror film fan. Like
Oh, Teenage Frankenstein, that was what I did.
Yes.
what?
If you like, I started, that was one of the early things I did, was I was a Teenage Frankenstein.
Oh yes. Yeah.
And that was really, people don't realize the real first horror show which used makeup horror. And that's become all horror films today, or all of these films, use makeup. But before that, you think of the original Frankenstein, there was no makeup involved. And no other film ever had it. Teenage Frankenstein was the first one, and I spent 3 hours in the chair getting made up.
Oh
But
my
that
gosh.
was the first of its kind, believe it or not.
Well, my favorite film has taken that to the next level, because I love Freddy Krueger. So Nightmare on Elm Street, I mean, I can't imagine how much, how much time he had to spend to get all of that burn,
Right.
all over. But I loved him so much. I loved those shows so much that I actually wrote them a letter and said, listen, because I'm originally from New Jersey, right by New York, but I go to college in California, LA. So I wrote them a note. They probably thought I was insane if they actually ever read it. But I'm like, listen, I love these movies. I want to be in the movie. You don't have to pay me. You don't have to pay me a thing. All I want to do is be killed by Freddy Krueger. Like, that's all I want to do. Just let Freddy kill me. You can make me be the last person who dies, and I'm in the film the whole time. You don't have to pay. I never heard a word.
By the way, Teenage Frankenstein followed a teenage werewolf, which was but both of them, by the way, were monster hits. I hate to use that term. They were the biggest film. As a matter of fact, I changed my name from Gareth Carmody to Gary Conway because of it. Because when this agent said, "You like the teenage?" I went to take the teenage, and I got the part, and that was followed. Michael Landon, who had done Teenage Werewolf, and when I say a big hit, it blew everything away. The AIP was the fledgling company that did it, and it just rocked everything. But what was funny was when I did the film, I was embarrassed to be in it. It was almost like being in a porn film for me, but not quite. And what happened was I thought, well, you're never going to see it. That when I first did it, was going to what? And then I was going to UCLA, and there's the Crest Theater, right at Westwood Boulevard. And there I saw on the marquee, Teenage Frankenstein. And then it forced me before to change my name from Carmody to Gary Cummings. I didn't want to be associated with it. But that's the point. So what
That's
I
why
learned
you changed your name.
that even though I said no, everybody saw it anyway, because I didn't want to go as an art student, go in there and then say, oh, look at what did Teenage Frankenstein paint today?
Oh,
You know,
all right,
so
all right.
but I had to protect myself, but it didn't. My point is, it didn't work.
I was going to ask why, how do we go from Carmody to Conway?
That
Why
was the
is
reason.
that? All right.
That was
Okay. So we're gonna shift a little bit direction and get into wine. But before we actually talk about Carmody McKnight, I just want to know everybody has an aha wine moment. So Mark, you can share your aha wine moment also. Like, what was the wine that you were like, huh, this is pretty good, and I think I want to get a little bit more into this. So
I don't know if there are probably many moments. Actually, there's one. Probably the greatest wine moment I had was in the first chapter in this book, when we planted our grapes, and 3-4 years later we made our first wine. And actually, we also planted Chardonnay. And when Marianne and I, we saved the moment to be outside, and at the end of the day, and look at the view, and we did not have any experience with the wine. But we opened the bottle, we poured each a glass. We had not tasted it at all, and spent 4 years in this making. And we both put each glass to our lips, and we swallowed it. And that's a moment you can never retell.
I agree.
That is a moment, because there was 4 years, and by the way, as you know, I think you know the story, crash landing in that wine glass.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that. Yeah, I remember the first taste of our very first Cab Franc, and I remember it. First time we tasted it in barrel, and then the first time we tasted it in bottle, and then the first time we tasted it after a little bottle shock. Memories. But so, Mark, do you have an aha moment? Like, yeah, wine is where I want to go.
Well, I think I've had probably way too many aha. Yeah, I sure did. Well, I remember a 19-year-old kid. I saved up my money to travel Europe one summer after one season or one school year going to Cuesta College. I'm a local boy.
Oh, all right.
So I put down 1 year at Cuesta College, and I saved up a bunch of money, and I said, well, I'm going to go visit my girlfriend in Helsinki, Finland, and spent about 3 months there, and then decided, okay, I'm going to get a Eurail pass, and I'm just going to cruise around France and Belgium and what have you. And I showed up on the 4th of July in Paris at the American Embassy. And at the embassy, they throw a huge party for, on the 4th of July. And I showed my passport, and they brought me on in, and lo and behold, there's just a bunch of, Americans drinking a lot. And,
imagine that.
Imagine that. And it just so happened that in this one courtyard, a busload of girls from Palo Alto showed up. And I noticed that there was a keg and that was unattended, and a bunch of bottles of wine unattended. And these girls came on in, and then one of the embassy personnel said, "Hey, would you mind helping us pour?" And so I'm like, "Sure, why not?" So I ended up spending the night just pouring wine and beer. And at the end of the night, they gave me this bottle of wine. I had no idea what it was, and lo and behold, it was this beautiful bottle of Margaux, and Chateau Margaux. And I'm like, thank you very, very much. And I went on my way and decided I was going to travel through the Loire Valley the next day. And then I just started, enjoying this beautiful
Collecting
trip to the
bottles.
Loire Valley, collecting bottles along the way. But that was really my first, eye-opening experience to some really, really great wines. And that kind of ruined me.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. I get it. Being to have that be your first experience, that's a high bar. That's a high bar to set. Yeah. Um, so now, Gary, everybody has, as you were talking earlier, you have your stories, and it's the stories that sell and all of that. And everybody, we have our reasons for why we love our vineyards, and everybody has their reasons for why they love their vineyards. But like, you are obviously the only person who has this story for how you found your vineyard. I mean, you crash landed into this land. So first, what were you doing in a helicopter, and how and why did you crash land
Well,
onto this
that was a
property?
period of time living in LA. It had the world's worst smog at that point. And I'd go out and play a little touch football, play some tennis. And within a half hour, I had a real problem breathing, as all my friends did. And I said that if I were an Indian or an Indian tribe, we'd have all left LA. But we have to stay there to go through this. And I said, but I got to find a place to go on occasion where I can breathe. And I was doing a series called Burke's Law at that time, a very famous series. And one of my actor friends who was a lot of the series said, I talked to him about, we were discussing that. And he said, my brother has a beautiful place up in a town called Paso Robles. And I never heard of it. And he said, here's a ranch. And I'm gonna tell you one thing about that place, but it has the greatest air. And he kept asking me about coming up with him to see it. And I kept saying no. And at one point I said, damn it, okay, we'll go up. And so I got a group of friends because I was going to go that far. I wasn't going to drive in a car myself. We just maybe go up with about 8 guys and girls and their wives. And we did. And it was on the east side of Paso Robles. And I had never had a greater time in my life. It was a real ranch. We were chasing horses. There was a great pond. We swim in the middle. But the point is, I took great breaths for 2 days. I could breathe. And on the way down in the car, it was night, and I was driving, and my wife Mary was next to me, and I said, we're going to buy a place there. And she thought I was crazy and didn't quite get it. Then I contacted my friend who introduced, and then I said, a good real estate agent up there. And he said, yeah, you've got us. He gave me the name. I contacted him. And then I went up there to look at what I thought was going to be an acre of land. Because that's what I was living in Brentwood at the time, or Bella Santa Monica. And an acre was a big deal if you got an acre. So life to me was an acre somewhere, right? And this would be an acre where I could breathe. And so we went up, and I met Archie McLaren. No, it wasn't Archie. It was the name escapes me right now, but the real estate guy. And we talked about it over some wine. I said, I just want to have a place where I could breathe. It's beautiful around here. I want to be able to do this, do that. Jim Smoot, that was his name, Jim Smoot. And he said, I got just a place for you, just a place. This was about 2 hours after we were drinking pretty good. And we went down into what I thought was a barn. And I thought we'd get into his Cadillac, because that's what Brentwood, all the real estate people have Cadillacs. So instead of a Cadillac, he brings out this helicopter. And I thought, wow, this is pretty interesting. So we got in this helicopter. I said goodbye to my wife and his wife. And we rose up in there and we started going. He lived right where the high school is, and middle of town. And we started lifting up, going higher. And as you get high enough, as we go west, you realize the rolling mountains. And at that point, it was a little later this time, and everything was incredibly green. As we got higher, I could even see the Pacific a little bit over the hills. And we went from one valley to another valley. And then we went into this one mountain valley that really took my breath away looking at it. And then he turned to me and said, "This is it." I said, "Oh, this is the land you're going to show me." And of course, if you know where we are, that's its own valley, so to speak, with the mountains going up. And he said, "Yeah, this is it." And it was so gorgeous of them. It took my imagination into the outskirts. And
Forget that 1 acre in Brentwood, man.
well, but I said, where's the land? He said, "It's all of it. It's 320 acres." And it wasn't an acre. And just as absorbing that, I thought to myself, I'm going to buy this place. This is too beautiful. And he suggested a price that to me was maybe the price of an acre in Brentwood. And just as I was thinking about that, there was an explosion. And he had hit as he was coming down these very high tension wires at that point.
Oh my gosh.
He began spinning, and I knew we were going down because helicopter's no way of landing. And I kept my focus on the land, and I thought to myself, sounds strange. If I live, I'll buy the place. And we crashed, got up, and I said, "I think I'm alive." And by the time the farmer who lived there came up and tried to figure out what was going on, and I said we had to get back to the realtor's house. And on the way, Marion and his wife, they were absolutely horror-struck, as they thought we had crashed a couple hours before because there was no news or no contact. When I walked in the door, she went about like this and said, "Hey, I just saw the greatest place. We're going to buy it." Like, what the hell? What about the crash?
So I wanted to know if you had a head injury, probably.
I did, yeah, whatever. Maybe that's where I got my spinal stenosis.
So neither you just walked away clear, clean, no scratches, no bruises, just woohoo! I'm a helicopter survivor,
Yeah,
crash survivor.
He was, I must say, had worked with fires, and he was a great pilot. And I think because he had been in situations in fighting fires and helping people rescue and so on, he could maneuver the minute. But I've talked to a lot of helicopter pilots because we have a picture of it since, and he said that's what you're doing there. That you survived. He said it's sort of amazing. So anyway, so crash landed, bought the place the same day.
And he probably thought, well, I ruined that sale. He's not gonna.
Yeah, that's
I crashed.
you have to be a certain age to be that crazy, really. And I was at the proper.
So you crash land, you buy the property. Are there still parts of this like did you keep parts of this helicopter?
No, the helicopter could never be repaired. It was gone.
But you didn't want to keep any for memorabilia? Like keep a blade?
I wasn't thinking that way. Although we did, interesting enough, we crash landed on limestone.
Oh.
And limestone, in the Irish world is very lucky.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I've often thought that maybe had something to do with it. Of course, we know it doesn't scientifically, but there was something in Irish lore that suggested that.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know it was limestone at the time.
Until you started.
The greatness of the land all came much later on. I had no idea. To me, it was just visual. In fact, I started out, there's nothing to do with vineyards. I went from the farming the previous farmer had done. I did that for a couple of years. And then we ended up with cattle would be fun to have. It was, to me, kind of a movie set at the end of the day at that point.
Okay.
And cattle was like, having cattle was, had that kind of Western romantic And I took that all in pretty good. I learned a little bit about, there was early on certain things. I learned a bit about the limestone, and I remember looking it up because I actually was interested in wine even before Marion was. And I realized that limestone, that you don't grow grapes. This is one of the first things I learned that nobody else that I know about, let's say very few, like nobody in Napa has ever mentioned that you don't grow in France a vineyard unless it's in limestone. And you stop where the limestone stops. But I can't have that discussion with anybody because they don't know it. But I have two books, most famous book on wine history, and that's what it says. And there's a book also I have there on champagne, and it says
I was going to
champagne.
say,
You know, that book
champagne
says
is very regulated by that limestone. Absolutely.
limestone, yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's very important because limestone is magnesium and calcium, essential for life. Magnesium being by far, far, far the most important nutrient. And none of us, by the way, get enough. That it's one of the reasons a lot of us suffer in terms of health because we get very little magnesium. But for vine health, it's so incredibly important. But that all came later, as you know a bit.
So that's what I was going to ask. You purchased the land, and you were doing cattle, and were you doing like olive trees or so?
No.
No, okay. So
what happened, the story there goes from, I was doing some film and writing and doing stuff in terms of the Hollywood thing. And I had a banker, and his name was Justin Baldwin, Century City. And I go in there every now and then and make a deposit or get some money out to do something. And I always have a little chat with Justin. And one day I guess we got talking. I can't remember how it started, but we talked about owning some land in Paso Robles. And it's interesting, at that time, I knew there was something unique about the land. And why it was unique, besides seeing this limestone, I knew the weather. I'd never seen weather like this, nor had anybody else, where there was absolutely no humidity, which is the most important thing you could ever have for wine, so you never had a spray. So there are a lot of indications of that. And I knew about, there was something in terms of the natural fertilization, because early on, I got a Japanese gardener. I wanted to do a beautiful garden, and he came and he did, and he fertilized it well, and it all died. Because when you're on top of 3 volcanoes, there's a lot of fertilizer there. Plus the limestone is a fertilizer. Plus then later on, I learned we had calcium selenite, which is called the wonder soil in France. And then we had a soil that doesn't exist anywhere on Earth that's even more. So with all of that, which I didn't know about, you got to be very careful if you fertilize. But anyway, getting back to Justin, I was talking a little bit about this, and he was on his way to Napa. He wanted to do the Great Bordeaux. And then I naively said to him, why would you go to Napa? Well, I said, they don't have limestone there. And I was naive, but I think I had some good insight into that. So he started getting interested, and I started telling him that we have almost zero humidity, and that was known. The other thing I knew from the big UCLA study way back then, that we had more days of sun, the west side of Paso Robles, than any place in California. And having a lot of sun is really good for grapes.
Kind of important.
Yeah. And that's one reason why we get monster ripening, of course. And so he came, saw the land, and begged me to sell him some. I ended up selling him half the vineyard. And of course, as we go on in life, the Resnick folks fell in love with the two, and they bought him out, but he still works. So but when Justin started doing the grape, but I got then caught up in it. And so when he began to plant, I planted the same varietals. That's how I began.
Oh, okay. All right. So you sell your property to Justin, and then go, he's doing it. I can do it. This is good.
What it was, I thought at that point, because I was getting a little tired of cattle, I didn't want to go back to growing wheat and barley. And I said, well, this because wheat and barley and safflower, you got to plant every year. What I liked about this is you only do it once. You put the
There
vine
you
in the
go.
ground, and you have this is a hell of a lot better than the other thing. Plus, I'm not chasing cattle all over the place, and so it seemed like a great idea. And Marion, my wife, was a great, as I mentioned, a wine lover. Anyway, in a good way, and that began that story.
And then did you hire a winemaker? Did you hire a vineyard manager, or did you just say, I'm doing this. This is my gig.
Justin and I worked together on that. We had a manager, we had a vine grower, Juan Navarez. Actually, he ended up living on the property, on my property, but and we did. By the way, Cabernet Franc. We're the first to grow Cabernet Franc. Remember that?
All right. I'm gonna have to hit you up and get some. We've been looking for some Cab Franc from the west side because we're on the east side. Yeah.
We don't have enough.
You know, an interesting little sidelight on Cabernet Franc. When very early on, my son lives in Bethesda, which is right next to Virginia, and I used to go to Virginia. I love their wineries and with wine. They never ever had Cabernet Franc there.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a guy who was quite influential, and I was telling him Cabernet Franc how it's less susceptible to certain moisture and so on. And he kept talking, and he came out and started using it. He was very influential there. And to this day, in Virginia, Cabernet Franc is the dominant variety.
Yeah.
And also our conversation.
It has claimed they're starting to claim it as their grape varietal, as well as the Hudson Valley is calling it their grape variety. Yeah.
Yeah, and they can thank me for that.
All right. Okay.
They didn't know jack about Cabernet Franc.
I love it. I love it. Well, you may not have enough to sell to me, but I'm gonna have to go see these vineyards one of these days.
Right.
So now you were one of the initial people on the west side of Paso, and long before Paso became Paso. I mean, I think we were before Paso became Paso, and we're young. Our first vintage was 2013, and for years we would have to see, where's the winery? Paso Robles. Where? Paso Robles. And then how many times have we said San Francisco, Los Angeles, in the middle, right? And then now when you say Paso Robles, people actually know where Paso Robles is, or they've at least heard about it. So I'm curious, because I've seen so much change in Paso in just the years that we've been there. What have you seen as major changes that are the evolution of Paso Robles since you've been there?
I think one of the beauties of Paso Robles is that it hasn't changed fundamentally. And if you go into town, there's still the library, there's still the park, and the restaurants. They get more every year. But that is what made Paso Robles special, because it has the agora, it has the Tuscadero, other towns, Santa Barbara, they do not have that. And there's at Cal Poly, a great professor woman who wrote a book on that very subject, and saying without the agora, you'll never be a great town. No. In fact, New York, one reason New York is a great city, because it has a Central Park in the center.
Right.
So without that Central Park, and the Greeks came up with that, you had to have a Central Park, and everything goes around that. But Paso Robles is it, and there's no other place that has that in California, except one other small town way up north. And so that's what makes it have this unique attraction. And whereas in Napa, there is no central aspect. I never really know where the vineyards and vines are, kind of all over the place. Go down the main drag, but in Paso Robles, the beauty of it, you're on the east side. There's people if you look at the map, that's the centerpiece, and that's as Greek as it can be in terms of what a great town has to be. And we've kept that, thankfully, kept that.
Mhm.
We haven't, and our people that have had a lot to say about this town have kept that intact. And even the restaurants here, you can't be a commercialized restaurant. They all have to be run by
Like individuals.
a
Right.
chef or something. So, and the other thing that I love, because I'm a very visual guy, a painter, Paso Robles, as you go down the main drags, does not have any electric wires above. That drove me, when I lived in Mandeville Canyon, drove me crazy there. When I went up to Napa, I love Napa, but it was awful because the main drag, these kind of things I noticed, have electric going all the way down. And I thought, a lot of people have really cared about this town, and now it's paying off. I can't imagine why anybody would be going anywhere else for wine or vineyards and not want to go to Paso Robles, since it's the only damn Mediterranean climate left. You know, this is a very shocking thing that should be to most Americans, that after thousands of years of Mediterranean climate, if you know, there's a huge study on this with 40 countries involved. You can look it up, and they show where Mediterranean climate was just a few years back, all along the world. Mediterranean climate is very, very rare, first of all. In all of the United States, if you look at the map of North-South America, the only Mediterranean climate that exists was this band in California, and some a little bit in Chile, and that's the end of that. And then in the other continent, a little bit in Australia. But if you look at the map, it's just tiny. People don't realize the Mediterranean climate. And the Romans, who conquered everything, would only conquer places that had Mediterranean climates because they wanted to grow grapes everywhere, as they
Right.
pretty much did.
As they did.
And the fact that global warming, we thankfully, that we got rid of most of the Mediterranean climate in the world today.
Yeah.
Now, whether some comes back miraculously, I don't know. But in California, there is none now. And little by little, they're having a harder and harder time, as you know, Napa. They can't grow a lot of the varietals that are very dependent. Fortunately, grapes could grow anywhere, anytime, most grapes, and you can make wine. As my grandfather, Sicilian grandfather, did in Boston. That was my first introduction. They made wine from wherever they could get grapes. But to have the supreme wine, we know, which is the Cabernet Franc you love, Cabernet Frankenstein, Cabernet Frankenstein needs for its full glory Mediterranean climate. Now, there are little aspects, by the way, of Mediterranean climate in the east side, you know that, and hopefully you have one.
And we, you know, and you have the whole Templeton Gap AVA
That's
that
right.
comes in and brings that over to the east side. So
Yeah, it seeps in there, but
Yeah.
outside of, we're full out, and our Mediterranean climate starts about 4 or 5 miles with it, and which is
Right.
now dominated by the sea climate. And by the way, that's an interesting thing about us, because we're the world's greatest, right? You know that. You have to repeat that.
That is what you said.
Remember, I'm not saying
that is my next question. I said, when we spoke on the phone, you stated that Carmody McKnight is the greatest wine on earth. I said,
yes,
that is
by
a
far.
tall statement. By far the greatest wine on
Not
earth.
even close,
So,
by far. Well, it's the greatest.
Tell us
because
why.
it's growing in the greatest soils. All right. And I mentioned some of the soils. We have not only limestone, but we have black limestone. No one ever heard of that. It's even greater than limestone. It's 5. We have 3 volcanoes. Do you know of any other vineyard on earth that has even 1 volcano? No. And why is volcanoes important? Because the magma is so rich.
Yeah. Oh, Mount Etna. You got to love those wines at Mount Etna.
Then we have what they call the wonder soil. French people should look up. It's called the wonder soil. It's called Castle Marmelonite. Called the wonder soil. And that's called the wonder soil, Castle Marmelonite. And in the most expensive, like Romani Conti, is supposed to have, this is all look upable, by the way, Castle Marmelonite. You know, a little bit of it. We have massive amounts of it, half the soil. Then when the studies came in, see, people are not going to, 300 earth scientists from all over the world and universities are not going to come and spend 15 and 20 years studying if it's not the world's greatest, right?
All right.
Why would they? And it's the world's
You need
greatest.
to have one of your labels you need to draw, although it probably would be not allowed, but you know how like it's the greatest show on earth is, you know, Barnum and
Yeah,
Bailey.
well,
You need to have a label
by
be
the
the
way,
greatest
I,
wine on earth.
I didn't come up with that concept. Tom Rice and the heads of Cal Poly came up with it. And that's why they didn't go up to Napa and study.
Right.
They didn't go to Bordeaux and say there's nothing to study there. And when I say we have pictures that are on our website of as many as 30, 40, 50 earth scientists from all the countries. I shouldn't say all the countries, but a majority of the European countries come there to study. And the reason they told me countless times, because they could not study what they wanted to study anywhere else, because the other place had used petroleum fertilizers and all kinds of things that would destroy a natural environment. That's what maize are. So why is it the greatest? We have never fertilized, ever. And most people around you in Napa are not only fertilizing, but they're using petrochemical fertilizers. They're giving all our friends cancer. That's why, and the point is, what I want to make is we're the world's greatest, but a lot of other people could be great too, if they followed us. Yeah,
Absolutely.
we don't want to be the world's greatest. We want to be just one of the wines out there. The fact that we're the world's greatest, to me, in some ways, is disgusting.
Well, we do. I have to say, Tawas Creek is pretty vocal in
Nothing. All those people fertilize. And matter of fact, it was already to begin with. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just done well. But they were grafted vines, which makes it more difficult. We should have a lot of this.
It's happening. It's happening. You can't take back what people have done in the past, but
I don't know if you could take back.
Happening.
I don't think you could take back 20 years of petroleum fertilizer the soils. You know what that does? It destroys the soil.
I do, but I do have to say, I don't know if you are, because he's not Paso. If you are familiar with Craig Camp, so he's in Oregon, Troon Vineyards. Are you familiar with Troon Vineyards?
Yeah, I am. I'm familiar with Oregon. Oregon has no Mediterranean climate.
Yeah, no, but
we got to get
see
realistic about this. Yeah. No, wine has been around for thousands of years. Okay, it's been studied all the time. It's in the book. If anybody takes the time to read the history book of wine, no Mediterranean climate, no grapes.
Right. Well,
now you grow any grape. I want to be careful to say that.
Right. You're talking high quality.
You're not going to grow the supreme grapes. So why would I go to Oregon?
I wasn't going to say you should go to Oregon. I just was going to say you can see the difference that when Craig came into his vineyard, it was a horrible. It was so.
Who's Craig again? I'm sorry,
Craig Camp in Troon Vineyards.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's
so he's a true proponent of organic and biodynamic and all of that. And
I don't know what that means. If you could explain what biodynamic means, explain it to me. I've looked it up and looked it up and looked it up. Don't have a clue.
Just being the true belief of giving back to the environment versus taking from the environment. That's the simple.
Does. That's what I'd love to see.
But that's okay. We are seeing more and more. We are seeing more and more. And I agree, you can't take back what has happened for 20, 30, 60 years, but you can stop doing it. And
I agree with you.
Start taking care of it. And that's what I'm saying is there's vineyards such as Troon that taking care of the vineyard was garbage vineyard. Like it was horrible. The vines were struggling, everything. And now you look at these vineyards and the cover crop is beautiful and the vines are producing healthy grape bunches and stuff. So I agree with you.
I want to make it clear and support you. And that is, you can still make wonderful wines, important wines, healthy wines, and not be in the Mediterranean climate. They don't have to be Cabernet Franc. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of varietals that can make wonderful wine. So it's nothing to do with that. As we
You're
talk
talking about the prime 5 or 6.
It's complex. It's like art. If we're talking about the supreme wines, that's going to be one conversation. But the overriding issue for me is how, first of all, Napa, to be honest about Napa, and it's one reason all those 300 scientists never went to Napa, because Napa is a alluvial fill, and it has no nutrients in that soil. The only nutrients they've ever had are the nutrients they apply. And of course, as petroleum fertilizer came in after the war, then everybody went to that. But before that, people would grow naturally. So when people say organically, that's why I don't know what it means, because I don't know what fertilizers they're using. I don't know if they're spraying. I don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And I know what we're doing because it's been, as a matter of fact, I'll show you what we've been doing if I can find it here. Oh yeah, hold on one second. Anyway, I have a pile of books there, and these are studies. They're 130, 40-page studies on our vineyard by all the scientists, not all of them, but in part. And they're thick books, 130, 40 pages, filled with the most advanced studies ever done of the earth. They use technology never used before, going way down and seeing what goes on.
Okay.
By the way, the other uniqueness of course of the west side is that it was that's where the ocean went to, and that's one of the reasons there's limestone. As you know, in other parts of the country the same thing happened. But when I say we're the world's greatest, we are, because it's science. It's just science. I can get who'll say that. But
I love it.
It's a crime, and others should be doing that.
Well, you know what? It always takes one. You have to be the leader. They
Well, we've been the
they
one
can follow your suit.
No, I don't buy into that anymore, because we've been the one for 35 years, and what's incredible in the ignorance is that I've almost seen no one around here ever really understand what went on with all these studies. And what they learned by the studies, it's the most important thing I could tell you or anyone. What they learned by the studies, that flavors don't come from chemicals, which is cursing the wine. They come from the macro and micronutrients that you must have. That's where flavors come from. And that's also where health comes from. That's why I came in, brought up in a Sicilian family. And when I was 5 years old, I had the honor of bringing up the wine from my grandfather's cellar. And every Sicilian grandfather for all time would make the wine. And I was the first one to drink the wine. And all the other kids were, because that was before antibiotics. And wine was the most important thing for all those people, for instance, to preserve your health. The idea we're in a society where kids can't even drink a wine is so laughable. And of course, they've never read history either.
Yeah.
But wine, remember,
that's what I said to you on the phone. That's why Sicilians live a long time, man. They
don't have the heart disease. But wine for centuries, first of all, supplied the nutrients when you couldn't grow. As for the Roman army, they by law, they each had to drink a liter of wine. And in my household, which by the way, had the 5 healthiest children being studied to this day, never had heart disease, didn't even know the word cancer, all of that. And remember, they ate fresh vegetables about a week or two of the year. That's all you could grow there in Boston. And so the rest of the year, they based on 2 things. On the wine they made, they knew that was the purest, and the olive oil from Sicily. That's their entire health. We do none of that today.
No.
None, right?
Nope. Well, I drink a lot of wine. I'll live forever.
No, but it's got to be wine, not polluted.
Right.
And you can make that for yourself, obviously.
So let's go move. We're almost at our hour. Actually, we're at our hour. But I just want to. Your labels are so beautiful. So I want to give some credit to them, because you're the artist behind all the labels. And I noticed that a lot of them have horses. So is there a story behind what?
You can see this. Because my daughter loves her. Can they see this? Yeah, sure.
Can you see this?
That's a drawing, of course.
Yes. That's the one I saw on the website. It's so beautiful. It's like a pencil drawing of.
It's a pencil drawing.
Yeah.
Yes. It's not necessarily my style, but I brought this actually to China. it was almost a Chinese version of a horse. Anyway, yes, pencil, but that was, I've done literally hundreds of labels, hundreds. In fact, that's what we're going to look at today. And we sold wine in China, which, by the way, we got when we were in China, we were on the cover. Wine in China is the #1 wine in China. And I did about 20, 30 labels for various wines for them. We got very involved with them because they actually, as a matter of fact, they got very involved in the studies. They know more about our studies than anyone. They brought samples of all the soil back there in the bottles that Tom Rice had originally done. They brought back calcium mineralite. I did at the Beijing University, the most important university. I did a speech there with 300. I was invited to do a speech, and there I raised the toast to the calcium mineralite. See, they know about calcium mineralite, and then we had about 5, 6, 7 events. Some attended as much as 30, 40, 50, 100 people. They all drank calcium mineralite.
I see.
By the way, they're a lot healthier than we are too, I have to say.
Yeah. All right, so you draw all of your labels, and you just do you taste the wine and get, this is what I feel the label is, or are you
Well,
drawing labels?
if I got there, I'd be in a lot of trouble. No, I don't. That's like it's funny. The French impressionists as well. They rely a lot on alcohol to give them some inspiration.
That is,
But I don't do that. Yeah,
yeah.
maybe I should. Maybe at
Maybe.
some point I'll change course. Yeah.
All right. And then just lastly, where can people find you? When I went online, there,
CarmodyMcKnight.com, and they can buy a real wine, a luxury wine, and as I mentioned, up in Napa, they've got about 30, 40 wines. Among the cheapest, I think, is Bryan Family, maybe of $800 a bottle. And we're far greater than that. Far.
But so also, if I can chime in a little bit, Lori, is that right now our wines are library wines, and we're strictly on allocation to list members. So we certainly are inviting anybody to join our list for allocations and future allocations. We have every beautiful wines that are in barrel right now. And as those are bottled, we are going to be reaching out to our list members and making offers for very rare, limited release luxury allocation wines. And they're only reds and Bordeaux blends. Our Cuvée Cadenza is Cab Franc, Merlot Cabernet. And we're very excited about that. And we also have a Cabernet Sauvignon. And then we may actually do some specialty labels as well, which we're looking at through some of our associations.
And the reason for that is Mark likes a few different wines, have fun. It is fun.
Yeah.
And I like to have fun doing a few different labels. So we said, what the hell? We'll do some of the barrels.
We'll do it together. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. And then Mark,
if you can't have fun with it, then what the hell's it?
In the meantime, I'll bring over some barrel samples of Cab Franc, and then you and I can share that and drink some Dracaena.
Okay, that sounds wonderful to me. That sounds wonderful. But is Carmody McKnight, are you on social media at all, or?
Yes, we do. We have a Facebook page as well. And we're starting to post there. And we're also just starting to release our single estate Tuscan volcanic olive oil. Mm-hmm. And that's called Pacific Oliva Tuscan volcanic. Also very limited release, 1,500 bottles that you'll see out there as well.
Yeah, and that's another story we won't get into. But if you want to talk about the world's greatest, we were the first to plant the Tuscan olive tree in California and in the United States. Wow. Nobody knows that. And yet the olive tree, the Sicilian olive and the other Italians, it's Tuscan olive. for centuries they've been growing those trees. Here in California, it started by accident by Gary Conway and Marion Conway. And at that point, when we realized that we were all being fooled by this fake olive oil that we thought was olive oil, we could not find one single Tuscan olive plant. We went up north. It's a whole story. It's another whole story. But the reason I got passionate about that is when I was 5 years old, my grandmother, married to my grandfather who made the wine, cured me of pneumonia. At 5, there was a death sentence, just about, with olive oil put all over me. And people in this country, that's another scandal. That when you go buy olive oil in the market, it's fake.
I will attest that I have had the olive oil you buy in the store, even what they call is good olive oil, but I have also had true Tuscan olive oil, and it is night and day. I will
Yeah,
give
you got to
that.
try ours. Ours is a whole different world.
All right, bring it with the Cab Franc. But going back so that people know more about you online, the allocations, is it X amount of bottles, or every vintage is different? And since it is so limited, is there an allocation every vintage?
There is not an allocation every vintage, just because we have so little of it. But we will be releasing vintage designated 2017, 18, and 19.
Well, also we never had a regular program because all the studies I keep mentioning about, they were all over the vineyard, and they interfered even with being able to have a proper harvest. And so we had allocated a certain amount to other people, but then we couldn't have some for ourselves. So it's been a little bit disruptive, but now it'll be more regular and has been.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you both for coming on and sharing your stories, and definitely the most intriguing how you found property ever. I don't think that will ever be surpassed, but thank you very much for sharing. And I look forward to being able to barrel sample. I'm going to hold you to that, Mark. I'm going to come on over to the west side. And
I'll come to you as well.
And Laura, you're fun to talk with. Great to talk with.
Oh, well, thank you.
Even if we're not doing a podcast, love to talk to you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I would love to talk to you also. And, I'll come on over. What you invite me, I'm coming. That's all you can tell you. But awesome. I would love to see your site. I'm in my brain, I'm kind of knowing where it is by how you were describing things, but it would be wonderful to see it in real life. So
we're as far west as you can go, by the way. Far west.
Yeah, I know.
And 5 more miles, you're Big Sur in the ocean. So.
There you go. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
and
Lori.
I appreciate you taking the time and to share your story with my listeners. And I will. I normally would have a glass and say slancha, so we'll just fake clink to say slancha. And thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Laura. You take care.
Thank you.